We are live. It's
We are
official.
live. It says,
Yeah.
it's just told
Yay.
me.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning, coach community. Hope you're feeling well on this Monday. It is Monday, and apparently we've just had a weekend. So we do have to rather carve out this time differently, don't we? So we've got some sort of differential. So it does feel like Monday to me. Does it feel like Monday to you, Nicole?
It does. I mean, it feels a bit like Groundhog Day, like every day's the same, but you're right. There is some kind of boundary between the weekend and Monday. I think,
generally speaking, yes. So we're going to talk to you today about conflict. Obviously not how to create it, but how to resolve it, and sort of more importantly, internal conflict with ourselves that shows up, what it feels like, what happens around that. And it's all based around your article, because of course you were in the April issue and you had a great response to that article as well, didn't you?
A really great response. Yes. Yeah. There's obviously a lot of internal conflict going on at the moment.
This is what I was thinking. You can always see with responses what it is that people are sort of going through, or what they need the most. And it's interesting because it's something that, there's not one person that's not experienced any conflict, either external or internal. So of course Absolutely. It's a across the board thing. So you are a workplace mediator and conflict coach, trained coach. And you tell the story in your article about how you experienced internal conflict, which was quite a surprise to you. But we were going to talk about something else you realised since doing the article, something that came to light about your own, another form of
a revelation
conflict you can share with us. Yeah. So we've saved it for now. So
we saved it.
Yeah.
So what was quite interesting was after the article, I started thinking a lot about things in my life which have caused me internal conflict. And one of the things that I realized was many years ago, I worked in PR, which I really loved. And it was, it's quite a dynamic industry. It's quite fun. It's vibrant. The culture was very toxic, which is a different conversation for a different day. But I absolutely loved it. And at that time, I just met my soon-to-be husband. But because of the type of industry I worked in, you had to be 100% committed to the job. You had to work blood, sweat and tears. You had to work day and night. You had to work evenings, like that.
I've been there. I feel
well,
your
exactly.
Pain. Yeah.
Exactly. You know where I'm coming from. But I met my, at that time, soon-to-be husband, and priorities then were family, starting my new family, getting married. And that's when I started to experience a conflict in my own values and in my own life, because I didn't want to start new married life not seeing my husband, but I also didn't really want to give up my amazing job, which I really loved. But I couldn't carry on in the job part-time. There was no remote working or part-time in those days. You're either
do or you
in
don't.
or out.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a big problem because, either I couldn't start married life not seeing my husband, those were important
No,
things.
that's not the greatest of starts.
Not an ideal start. No. So what happened was I made the decision to give up this amazing job, and I then started to, so that at that point my values were in conflict. I was struggling with both decisions. Do I stay? Do I go?
Were you aware of your values in that really clear way at that point? No. Because otherwise it would have been easier to work
if
out.
I knew, absolutely. If I knew then what I know now, it would have been very different. Because I didn't have the experience or the knowledge or the maturity, I suppose, to have those conversations with my then husband about what I was going through, and he just, I suppose quite rightly was saying, well, when am I going to see you? Why are you working again late tonight? He was in a very different industry, so didn't really get the whole sort of media dynamics and what was expected of you. And so I started experiencing this sort of what I would call this push-pull, when you feel you don't quite know what you feel out of alignment, out of sync. And it's only when you make the right decision that you start to feel that you're doing the right thing, and that's when your sort of conflict has been resolved, your internal conflict is resolved. So what happened for me was I gave up my job, not with the greatest, I suppose, enthusiasm, and I set up a new business on my own, which I really did as just a means of doing something, hated it, and carried this, I suppose, resentment within about giving up this amazing job that I had. And then what happened to me was very interesting. So if you can imagine, I got married, you know, everything, life was exciting. I had amazing friends, wonderful family. But what happened is I actually went into this depression because all my values were
out of sync.
Were out of
well,
sync.
They're not being met, were they?
Exactly. My sort of higher purpose, my needs weren't being met, and I lost my sort of need for that need for connection and community and identity. I felt I lost a lot of myself during that period. And this sort of vibrant person that I used to be, I felt soulless, actually.
And you know, can I just say that is incredibly powerful what you've just said, because I think sometimes people think, oh, values, just some words on the page that that are quite important to me, and they don't seem to realise until they do that sort of work that it's really the core of you what's so important. And we make these decisions around us so that we can accommodate that. I won't do that, give up the great job so I can be here, and of course I want to be here, so why am I so unhappy? And then what happens is what you've described, of course, is that you'll sink, because it's almost like you're being depleted, drawn from, and not feeding yourself with what you need. But it doesn't make sense, because you've got married, you're happy, and you know why. And so then you have this kind of implosion. Everything implodes, really. And it all connects back to values, which is what I always say. And it's so interesting to hear the massive impact it can have when they are not being met.
And in alignment, and it's that sort of push-pull of it's like the sort of the devil and the angel. One's telling you that you should do this, but the other's telling you that. And it's only, I always say to people, my clients, a lot of people don't follow their gut instinct.
No, they don't trust it.
No, and I actually think that gut instinct is, one of our biggest drivers, because it tells us whether we have met our values, have been met. And I'm not saying that we should all go out and just follow our instinct, but I do think that it's it really, really tells us whether we are doing the right thing, and whether our values
are being, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's interesting about the instinct part, I think, is that it ties so closely to values. So almost your values are your conscious thinking. It's you've done that work and you know what they are. It's very cognitive. Yes. Whereas your gut isn't. It's your unconscious. So when you don't really know your values and you're kind of just going along, your gut kind of comes up and says, this is not right.
Listen to me. Yeah.
But because you don't know clearly what your values are and what that all means, you sort of go, oh, I don't know, and I know it's telling me that, and then you get this split.
Yeah,
and then of course we both know what happens with that one, because when you go the wrong way, as sometimes you do, because not trusting your gut and don't know your values, and inevitably it doesn't work out too well, you go, I knew it, I could feel it in my gut, and then you're cross with yourself that you didn't, but you see, because that's so misaligned, it's just not working. And of course that's what you're talking about as describing it as internal conflict, and it's all just one big piece. It's so fascinating.
And in fact it's quite interesting that, again, thinking back, so this article brought up a lot for me as well. It's very interesting. I think I might have sort of had it all hidden inside for many years, and this has sort of brought it out for me, because I was thinking other things that have happened, and my father used to be in property, had a very big property company, and he had I think 6 partners. Anyway, they had this sort of amazing big dynamic property business, international business. And they sold the business out to an Australian company. I'm going back sort of 30. And actually, this is all around the same time as when I got married. So it's quite interesting, the timing.
You put all the parts together, don't you?
This whole big jigsaw.
More than an article.
Yes, wow, lifetime of articles probably. And he sold his property business. They sold the property business and took half the payment in shares in the Australian property market and half in cash or whatever payment. And about a year later, the property market crashed and in Australia, and so the shares were worth nothing. So he had this being a sort of big honcho in this big company, and then suddenly went to working solo. But what happened for him is he needed that sense of community. One of his, big values was, having an identity and being part of something.
Yes.
And so when he then left the business because everything fell apart, he was working on his own. And again, although I guess he had financial security, he didn't operate well on his own. He needed. So again, it's all about this, what was his important value at the time? He loved the community of being part of something else, and then suddenly going solo. And, that brings, and I see that quite a lot in the work I do, it brings up, sometimes people get depressed when they have big changes or shifts in their life, and they can't understand why. And they're following what they think is the right path, but actually their value is not being met in what they're doing.
They're not aware of it.
They're not aware of it. And even now, I've had conversations with people who, during everything that's going on, are sitting there now suddenly having this sort of, I suppose, light bulb moment. Am I doing the right thing? Because a lot of people have had a lot more time to reflect on their lives during everything that's going on. Am I doing what I really love? Am I doing what excites me, my passion, or am I just doing this sort of day-to-day grind to get money?
It's interesting because a lot of people, people are gagging to get back to sort of normal, which has gone anyway.
Whatever that is,
We've only got something new to create as ever. But the question is really, I think, I've had a few conversations around this, is what if you just went back to exactly how it was, were you happy with everything there? Because the chances are the question will be like, well, no, but I knew it and I felt comfortable, I knew so it's all about being comfortable, and you're only comfortable and aligned if you're actually meeting your values
and your needs. Exactly. So I think that's a very interesting thing at the moment. Or you've frozen. Are you there? Hello? I don't know if I've lost you. Hello, hello. So I think I'm live on Facebook on my own without Teresa. And she is coming back. Just talk amongst myself. I suppose I should just carry on talking, really. For anyone who is still watching, Teresa has been locked out, so she's trying to get back in. The powers and the love of technology. We're all victims of it, but we need it. If anyone is still watching, Teresa has been booted out, but she's trying to get back in. So I'm getting messages saying she's nearly there. So she's coming back and we will resume the conversation. Hello. You're back.
Sorry, I got totally booted off. In there, and I was commenting on the thread, but I didn't know if you had your phone open.
I saw. I just sent you. I just sent you a message back. That's so funny.
Sorry about everyone. This is real life. You can't worry about these things. So part 2, or I guess it just carried on that whole live.
It just carried on. Never mind.
Yeah. We'll just move swiftly forward. So let's recap. So you were in that conflict state. You're noticing that, and this has all been brought up by the fact that you wrote the article. You're talking about that, and it's kind of made some other realizations come to the surface. So what was the sort of outcome? You were at the stage where you're just like feeling really depressed and low and not really knowing why.
Yeah, and I think that it took me quite a long time to kind of. I don't think I ever really understood it until many years later, and probably until I started doing the work that I do now to understand what was behind it. But I guess once I started moving along in my life and I think doing other things at that period, without realizing it, I suppose different needs started to be met. My different values were back in alignment. I then started to have a family and different priorities took over my values.
Is this still all quite unaware of your values?
Yes.
It's sort of happening.
Not completely unaware. I really didn't understand it. I knew what I was feeling, but I couldn't describe it. I couldn't have described it then.
And this explains why a lot of people are out of sync, because if you think about that, we say things like, oh yeah, and then things started to get better, and then this happened, and then that happened. Like we're just these little like players in our lives.
That's right.
And not realizing that we could actually control that. But instinctively we tend to find what works for us. But it's when you've got that clarity and that awareness around it, you can guide it that way from the start and avoid all these dips and problems and things happening that just were lucky or got better. I just don't believe in any of that. It's all from us. So it got better. And how did you really sort of identify with your actual value set? Was it when you started to coach or when you were coached? Or
Yeah, I think when I started, probably when I, before I trained to be a mediator, I studied psychology for about 6 years. And I just did that for my own self-interest.
Yeah.
I guess I was probably drawn to it without realizing why. And I started to understand a lot of stuff then, about what was going on in my life, some things that I wish I didn't know, and some things that, you learn a lot about yourself
It's
along
not
the
all
way.
the pretty stuff, is it, that does the
No.
good work? No.
But it's the important stuff, the stuff that you don't really want to know is actually what you need to know. And that's what helps you move forward in life, if you take something from it. So I think that was probably the beginning of my understanding of a lot of things on my journey.
Yeah, it's like a big jigsaw, isn't it? I always say we've got quite a lot of the parts, so we know we've got the general picture of the jigsaw, but there tends to be a lot of gaps, right? And then of course that's where things slip through. But like everything you're describing, your own experience, and I can totally relate to that in terms of, pre me being aware of my values, which is terrible grammar, but you know what I mean. So before I was aware, there was a lot of things that went around like that for me, and you just kind of go with it, don't you?
Yeah.
But everything you're describing is internal conflict and misalignment, and so the work that you do, Nicole, sort of mainly in the workplace, in corporates, and some individuals as well, they'll come with conflict. So am I right in thinking that you do a lot of values work as well, or you spend
a lot of values?
Yeah, same as me. You spend a lot of time finding out what those values are and digging them out with people, and then don't they all of a sudden go, oh
yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
And it really starts to, the wires start to really fuse with that understanding, and then of course when you know your values, everything becomes a lot easier
and clearer. Yeah,
go on to the next stage of sort of development. So it's very much that personal development, and we're always developing as coaches, like all the time. We're not sort of cooked and done and ready just because we're coaches. That's very important, I think, to highlight, because you've been really open. In fact, you put it in your article about how you weren't very coachy and quite shocked yourself in that scenario on the airplane when you suddenly had a bit of a meltdown about your bags being shifted around. And you thought to yourself, oh, I'm a coach, I'm a conflict coach. What I shouldn't be doing this.
I mean, that haunted me for such a long time, that incident. It really did. And what's very funny is we were on the plane with some very good friends of ours. And I remember her looking at me, turning around. I didn't put this in the article, but her actually turning around, looking at me, and going, "What on earth is going on?"
Who are you?
And afterwards, like that whole weekend when we were around, I was like, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe it. And she says, oh, don't worry about it. It's nothing. Everyone does it. I'm going, no, but you don't understand.
Uncomfortable for you.
Yes, because of the work I do. I was, really.
Yeah. Again, that conflict. And for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, haven't read the article, go and have a read of it. But basically, Nicole was on a busy plane, crammed in, or doing all the bags, and lost her cool a little bit when someone just kind of shoved all her stuff along in the locker and, moved, yanked your hold all out of the way. And we know how it gets. But suddenly you just saw red that like really made you cross, and you had to go at this person just without thinking, without any sort of self-control. Well, we've all done it, come on. And she just had to go at the person, and then was completely mortified, thinking, why was I not able to control myself? And why on earth did I see red about that? And what, just tell us what it was in the end. What was the value that was
it was respect. It was just my drivers in life is one of the most important thing is respect. And my thought was, well, I would never do that to somebody else's bag. I'm always super careful and whatever. And the fact that she sort of came in and shoved it around, and that was like, what are you doing?
Disrespectful to you.
Completely.
You read that as that is disrespectful, and then of course you've got that clash, and people do rise up around their values, and that's why sometimes people will say, oh God, you're overreacting, or why are you upset about that, and all these things, because they've got a different set of values. So really it's the compass of all, isn't it, of us, and that translates into business, work, personal, friendships, relationships, and it can make life a hell of a lot easier. But in finding the values that we hold, you also find out all the stuff that you think, right, a lot of learnings, that are a little bit sort of more shadowy, if you like, but that's really important as well. So tell us a little bit more about your work in terms of what you take people through, and kind of what do they tend to come to you for? So we know like the root of it. So what do they present with?
A lot of time, for example, I'm working with one client at the moment who always gets triggered in, during specific things that happen in her work life. And when we explored it and went sort of a bit deeper with it, it happens in all areas of her life.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Which
it looks different.
Yeah, it's sort of dressed up differently. And so, for example, when I sort of went a bit deeper with her about her relationships and friendships, it was just the same thing dressed up, the same pattern of behavior. So that was, what she came to me originally for was a trigger for something else, actually ended up being about something else.
And isn't that always the way? Pretty much, I would say, I don't think I've had a client yet so far that has sort of come for one thing and got that and gone off again.
No, the presenting issues. The presenting issues.
And they'll present to me with business issues, like I want to grow my business, I want to do this, or I can't do that often. But it's not at all, and that's why they always say, this is more than I bargained for. I think when they think they're going to get a whole load of business instruction, it's not like that at all. So it's great stuff. And as a result of all of that, I'm presuming that you are much more aligned these days, and easy to spot any conflict that pops your way. And how does it show up for you? Now, if values are sort of gone against, what's your experience?
I still get triggered. I still feel that sort of sense of, I don't like what's going on here. But I think what now I'm able to do is actually understand it, because I've identified it, and then I have a choice of how I respond to it, as opposed to reaction. And I think that's very important to differentiate. I will always be triggered by many things, we all will, but it's how you choose or are able to address it. So now that I'm more aware of situations, I'll take a few minutes, and this is what I would always do or suggest with people I work with. Once you're aware of it, that's the vital point. I've been triggered. Once you're aware of it,
then haven't you? Just
put the brake on. And I always personally try and sleep on something. If it's an issue that doesn't need to be dealt with immediately, I will always try and sleep on it, and give myself a bit of time to think how do what I initially feel in the moment, which is
well, that's the reaction. You see, there you've got the reaction, and then it's like, that's my reaction. Is that what I'm going to share? Is that what I'm going to bang out on the email? Is that what I'm going to say? What's my response going to be? Okay, so your reaction, like you're saying, your response is different. And then in that gap is where you can consider what to do. And it's interesting that being aware of the values and the things that you're saying, it also takes away that belief that person was intending to be disrespectful. Because until we've got that understanding, we're just like, oh, you're so disrespectful. Well, of course, that's not even true or fair, because they're probably not, or we don't know if they are or they aren't at that point. So when we realise this is my value of respect, and I think you've been disrespectful, it doesn't mean that they are. And so it creates that awareness that their intention
was not malicious,
not to be disrespectful to you.
Yes.
And just that can take it down in the moment, because it's all about you. It's all about you. So you got to own that and not just dump it on that other person. And that is a really interesting piece of work when that sort of realization hits. And then every single situation you're in, you cannot handle it differently, because you know.
That's
so
right.
you can't unknow.
Absolutely.
And you don't go back to how you were, and that's growth. That's amazing when that happens, I think.
I mean, in the mediation work I do, a lot of conflict is based on a clash of values and not recognizing each other's values.
Yes.
And I think the point you just made is very interesting, that often it's not an intentional behavior to cause, whatever the value is that they feel is sort of been challenged or threatened. But it's because we are so different. And I remember years ago, I've remarried and have stepchildren, and I remember that when I first my second stepdaughter, who I now have the most amazing relationship with, we at the time had a lot of issues together, and we actually had worked with a therapist because it was really bad. But a lot of it was we had different values about what was important to us. And again, that was a huge revelation to me, because
Game changer, isn't it? When you suddenly realise why stuff's going on like that, a different value set. And if they're very different, like when we talk about our 5 core values, if you don't even have one in that core that's the same, then the other ones are in different order below that as well. You're going to have even more conflict, which is why some people just say, I just can't get on with them. I can't work with them. Whatever it is, because the rapport is just so low, so hard to find. But you can always find a stitch. You can always find a stitch, as you clearly have, because now you've got that good relationship, which is really interesting. But, intention is everything. Everything. Our own intention, the intention of others, you can't assume someone else's intention. And if you break it down, whoever would intend to cause a problem, like real intention, most people, like you say, and not wanting to do that. And most people are confused when it happens. They're like, I can't understand what's happened. This great big conflict that we're in. So it's unpicking all the pieces, isn't it?
That's
and
right.
unraveling the ball back to, well, it's the same thing really. We're like a broken record. It's the values work. It's just that it seeps into everything. That's why I love it so much. And it certainly changed my life. My coach was very, very deep values trainer, and I was like blown away by that. Often talk about that. And all of my clients have changed their value sets, not changed their value sets, but they've been aware of them. And some of them aren't actually the values that they think. They're other people's values, or they've been input from parents. They've kind of brought them forward, and they've got, this is important. When you dig into it,
why?
It's not important to them. It was important to their parents.
That's absolutely right.
And they've brought it forward, and then they realise, well, actually, I don't really want this one, and we can go much further down the list even. And that, it's really great stuff. So it's whatever we call ourselves as coaches, the foundation is that. And there's actually another article in this month's magazine about that from John Thompson, who's incredibly powerful on values. And I don't know if you read that. If you've
I did.
That one. Yeah.
I mean, I completely, like you, most of my work is values and beliefs based. Because I think that's the core of everything.
It is, and that's why we talk about alignment. And the magazine, Coach Magazine, and the coaches that come into that are all in alignment with what the brand stands for, with me, and it feels right and it feels good. So, I work hard so that is all in alignment too, because all of them, I would say, share very similar values, and that's why it's working.
That's why it works. Absolutely.
And you have to be steered by that all the time. So, decisions I make around my business, the magazine, that has to be steered by my value set. And when other people come in with what's important to them, and they might put a bit more pressure on us in various ways, you've got to be able to say, well, I hear you and I respect that, but it's
not where we're at.
And that comes from the values. And that's why people daren't speak up sometimes, or don't want to say, or become people pleasers and all kinds of things. But it's not about that really. It's about knowing who you are, and what's important. And
being authentic to yourself, I think, as well. really.
Yeah, and that's a constant challenge, right? Because
Yeah.
we always want to be, I haven't heard that word for a while. It's authentic has been taken over with unprecedented and other new words like pivot and stuff
pivot,
like that.
Yeah.
But
I listened with your chat with Cros the other day.
Yeah.
Piv's, he's never used it. No.
It's so funny. It's true though, you know. So, but you know, the buzzword a while ago was authentic, being your authentic self, and that's a very powerful word, authentic. And simply to me, it just means to be real, to be true to yourself, which links to the values. But a lot of people aren't authentic all of the time.
Yeah, and that's when you get that, you know, when you meet someone and there's something not congruent about them.
Yeah, you can't put your finger on it.
Yes, and that's when they're not being authentic to themselves, because you can see what's coming out of their mouth is not how they're presenting themselves, or there's just something not right. Yeah. And
sorry,
go. I was just going to say I did an interesting body language course recently. It was an NLP body language. It was just a day thing, and it was all about, it was really interesting, and it was all about how we present ourselves and actually what comes out of our mouth. And when you can really, do you see, when you can't pinpoint it, that's when someone isn't being authentic to themselves. Whatever's going on for them inside, whether it's intentional or they don't realize, you know, that's when their true self is not being.
And it'll always show out in physiology as well, and that's what NLP is all about. It's wonderful. I mean, as you know, I'm a big NLP fan, and you know, I use it a lot in my work. And you can say what you like, you can make the words, form the words, and plot them out. Might sound great, but all of the physiology will give it away. And so when you're listening, and you know, when I'm coaching someone, I'm looking at that. Sometimes there's two different things. They're saying this, but it's all being given to me. I'm listening on another level, which is really, really interesting, because when you can raise that, they always know. Always know. There's not one person that's ever gone, oh, really? I mean, that's complete unawareness, and most people have a basic sense of awareness. So you know what's going on. Again, it's back to that center of who you are and just figuring it all out, really. And that's, you know, it's a pleasure to do that kind of work, isn't it? I think, because it's personal development, and then you see people grow, and then of course other things that impacted beyond them, you know, in their families and relationships, business, stuff like that. So yeah, I think, you know, the message here is if you've got conflict internally, it's a good thing, because it's a sign that you need to go and do some work and sort of figure out it's not actually the external conflict that's a problem at all. It's all us, and that's that responsibility piece as well, isn't it? So
absolutely
interesting. Yeah,
very
well,
interesting.
Thank you for your personal sharing as well of insights, because I think that's always interesting for people to listen. You know, it's all very well to deliver lots of facts and how it works and what's this and what's that, but you know, we're people and we want to hear really the experiences of others, don't we? That's what really resonates.
I think as long as it helps, as long as it gives, you know, sharing for sharing's sake is, but I think when it sort of illuminates the reason behind it. So.
Well, I think people, they listen to your story, and people that I speak to and coach say, oh, I don't want to talk about me and my story. And I say, listen, they're not really listening to your story, not really. They're listening to what you're saying, and they're translating it into their version, their life. Okay, so that's why it's important to tell that story and the journey, not just the endless story, the narrative, but the journey of it and where it went and what you realize, because then they just, you know, there's a parallel in their life that they create. Go, oh, that's the same as me and so me, and that sort of helps them.
Lost you again. You back? No. No connection. I think we've lost Teresa. So I'm going to say goodbye then, because I think we were drawing to a close. So Thank you, Teresa. And I'm sure we'll catch up later.